Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, Judy.
Good morning, everyone. How are you?
Good morning.
This is Jamel, by the way.
We see you, or your name anyway.
Oh my gosh. This is that we see you. I was like, oh my, you sound like my teacher right now.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean
I
it.
was like, oh, bless you, Ainsley. I was like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? How you been, Ms. Dr. Judith?
I'm not bad. How about you?
I'm great. I'm great. I can't wait to share some information with you, though. My research at Johns Hopkins with the AI.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm taking a 10-week business strategy class. We're almost done, though. But yeah, they have generative AI course coming up, but that's what that's doing right now. It's called business strategy with AI. It's a new course thing that they have at Johns Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
So
Interesting.
yeah, it's good, but this is it's the way of the world right now. It's not going nowhere. I'm gonna tell you that.
Yep.
Yeah, you got to learn how to use it well.
Yes, yes, and be very the data labeling, the language processing, the algorithms, all that. So, but yeah, like I said, I can't wait to share with you guys. Actually, I have so my first project. Guess what it's on? Prison management. Yeah.
That's very
So
interesting.
So when I get my grade, I've already done the project. So the project consists of it's like 360 million plan. We have to come up with one of the clients is very dissatisfied with the initiative of the AI and the strategy in which they're striving to implement computer processing, labeling data with some of the individuals incarcerated. So yeah, but we'll talk about it.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Jamal.
How you doing, sir?
I'm doing okay. So we have a lot to do today. So Ainsley, do you want to get us started with our agenda?
Yes. We have a lot of recommendations that we're going to be talking about today, so I thought that we could just get started with that. I did extend the time to an hour and a half just because I think that we might have a lot of discussion on these points. So hopefully that works for everyone.
Okay. By the way, thank you for the invitation, Delegate Pasteur. You had a wonderful party celebration last night and really enjoyed it.
And I thank you and others who came. It was truly a blessing. So I feel like, and I need all of you to know, this is like my give back job. This is not my career. I've had my career. And so this is my give back. So it's my privilege to be working with all of you. You're such incredible people, incredible servants for the people of Maryland. But thank you.
Thank you. So just before we get started, maybe a couple of things we've said to the other two groups. Some of you have been there. The recommendations are part. This is the recommendation itself, but the final report will have a rubric that we fill out as well that most of you have seen. So the recommendations at the top, and then there's various sections that'll have to be filled out. So, but we'll talk about we want to talk about the recommendations, say that we're clear on them. And there's the rubric. So after each recommendation will come some background, some description of current practice, best practices if we can find them, and if applicable. And the description of the recommendation if there's something that's different from current practice, and then how would we measure the recommendation if we implement it? How do we measure that it's successful? So some of you have sent a lot of stuff in already, and the higher education stuff is pretty well mapped out by Andrea and her group. But so and some of ours are as well. But anyway, so we should get going with the, take them one at a time. Oh, the other thing I got to mention, because some of you still don't know, is that Delegate Pasteur and Embry and Simpson invited Ainsley and I to talk with them. They have decided to go out in front of the commission ahead of time to bring what they think are important pieces of legislation to this session, and there's 7 or 8 pieces of from a couple from our group, which we'll point out, a couple from higher ed, and a couple from career tech, and they're going to go forward regardless of our report, because our report's going to take a while to be submitted and be approved, and they'll submit this legislation. So they'll be working with us on the recommendation, but they're going to take them forward separately. So I don't know if Delegate Pasteur, if you want to say anything really quickly about that.
No, I think we'll just go through them and make note of whatever the thoughts are of the folks on the commission, because that's important for us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing it up.
So Ainsley, you want to get us started on recommendation 1 then?
Yeah, recommendation 1 is to create data dashboards for key performance indicators such as enrollment, attendance, waitlist, cancellations, capacity, closure rates, pass rates, and percent change over time.
Ainsley, could you make it a little bigger? That's good.
Is that good?
Yes,
Okay.
that's great.
And I also know that the Department of Labor, you guys are transitioning over to Click, which I think does have data dashboards. At least that's what I understand.
Yeah, and that would be put into the matrix, you know, that we have following the recommendation, acknowledging what is being done. So when we work on that with you guys, we'll try to keep that keep that as succinct as possible, but yet make sure that people know that stuff is being done. Not all these recommendations are completely brand new. They're updates, or there's things going on already, and we want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and go ahead.
So I'm going to kind of do what I did in the other meeting, and 1, 2, 3, and 6, and I'm specifically excluding 4 because I feel like that's a large project that would need its own management. But 1, 2, 3, and 6 really go into 1, because you're creating the dashboards, you're looking at that. Included in that is when they're removed from the program due to disciplinary actions. Included in that is the correctional education enrollment. Included in that is the number of students who don't have GEDs that are waiting for placement for that mandatory student, or excluded for some reason. So I kind of feel like that could be like written into a single recommendation that puts all of that data that we're asking for into that dashboard to make it useful. And then what 4 would be 2, which would follow up on it and say, consult for how to best use that data.
It makes a lot of sense to me. And then you could explain in the explanatory part the different pieces of it, but it would be less intimidating to have, well, how much that would make several fewer recommendations.
Yeah, okay, so I guess what you're saying is we could take 1, 2, 3, 6 and put that in one recommendation. And so that's fine. That makes sense to me. And see, a lot of our work is coming together now as we conceptualize this. And then I would say recommendation 4 should stand on its own, that we should recommend getting an independent educational analyst to help this, to evaluate the use of it. Somebody from, I don't know how that would happen. We're not going to recommend anything that costs money, but we should still make the recommendation. Okay.
So I just wanted to say, in all of the data, I don't see anything specific to ensuring that information and data regarding students with disabilities is disaggregated.
We had one before, and that's not here now. Let's see. Yeah, and we're going forward with having somebody take a look at the program by the way. Alyssa has identified somebody we have in contact with, Michael Wilson, who was recommended by Peter Leone, and he's going to donate some free time to come out and look at the programs. We'll coordinate that with labor. He wants to visit some special ed programs and talk to people to give us his feeling about, you know, in addition to the reports that we're getting from MSDE. Okay.
But I do think, I mean, as we're just talking about data, I think it's important to make sure that the students with disabilities piece is captured.
How about then we wrap that in under recommendation 1, something about special education, number of special education students, and what else, Alyssa?
Well, when you talk about, you know, pass rates, I mean, I don't know whether it's on the dashboard. I know that labor is collecting the information right now, but I think it's important. So it is happening. But I think we need, if our work group is about including special ed, I think some of the recommendations have to be specific to ensuring that the data is accurate. So it's not only, enrollment, it's passage. I mean, I think labor is looking deeper in terms of disaggregating it by disability. But I think, we need to acknowledge that that's an important piece of this.
Is that captured there with Ainsley just wrote, disaggregated data for students with disabilities? So then it implies that all those other things we're looking at to see special education students are involved with the other key performance indicators, which would include looking at this list, attendance, enrollment, wait lists, cancellations, and stuff like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do think, I know we're going to get to 6, but documenting when students are removed, but also how long. 6 is just as document when incarcerated students are removed from correctional due to disciplinary issues. I mean, I would have follow-up questions for how long, and are they receiving any services while removed.
Okay. So as we build this, then we want you to review it, because we're going to go now and write these things. Now, if we approve the recommendations today, then we're going to go over and start writing them. So we're going to send that back to everybody, and you can continue to critique it and add to it. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, John and Rochelle.
My question was about recommendation number 3, the number of IIs who do not have GEDs. What's the scope? Is that just within the education program? Because if so, that's all of our ABE students. But if you're looking for all IIs in all institutions, it's a much bigger number. And I don't see Danielle here. I guess, Rochelle, you could tell us whether or not that's even a number we would be able to ascertain from that larger population.
Yeah, I was going to speak to that, so I can build on that. I wanted to give some input on recommendation 1 and 3, and then a little something to what Alyssa said. So I think capacity is really broad. So at some point, breaking that down, because what would be helpful, by the way, I think those are great numbers to have. What would be helpful is if we knew capacity, right? How many can the institution take? If we then knew bed count of the capacity, how many beds are actually filled? And then of the beds that are filled, who has or doesn't have a GED? I think that's the specificity you're referring to, John. So that's broader to the institution, because that may help us with why the numbers are low. And then for Alyssa's, I think what we need for special education students is inherently tied to segregation, to have the segregation data, because that's where we do see that a high majority of our special education students do end up on segregation. Some of them are there for a month, some of them are there for longer. So if we were able to map that segregation data in, that would also be additive to the special education data.
Segregation data for the special ed students, not
In particular, for
Yeah.
special education students in particular, yes.
And should we just say GED? Should we say high school diploma? Both, because people come in with a high school diploma, but so we should know both.
And for what it's worth, Stephen, I think that I can't remember who we were speaking with. Maybe it was at the last MEJC meeting where we were encouraged to use high school diploma instead of GED. Technically, that's the document that we're all striving for.
Perhaps then we should, building on that, John, put high school diploma first, HSD, and then parentheses, GED or high school diploma. Because they're both high school diplomas, but they're two varieties that we have in Maryland.
Yeah, and I think the big distinction was Maryland doesn't distinguish between the two. Like a Maryland high school diploma, whether it's received as a result of passing the GED, it's still a high school diploma, no matter what. That's semantics.
It's actually a piece of paper that they received from the state that says that, yes.
Yep.
On the capacity, though, I mean, there's two capacities here. One is the capacity institution itself, and the other is the classroom capacity. We know the classroom capacity rated by the fire department, so we can use that. So we have capacity for classroom capacity and institutional capacity.
And go ahead.
So I have a question to ask to people that know more about funding and federal stuff than I do. Is there a relevant distinction between the GED and high school language when it comes to the training, when it comes to any federal funding or federal statutes? Like, is that language that way for any reason, or does it just really not matter?
I don't understand the question.
Yep. Do you mean in terms of whether or not there's a value in making that distinction from the person who's received that document?
I'm wondering whether there's a value in making that distinction in terms of, like, I see GED everywhere. I see it in the all of the community colleges and the programs. I see that GED language has been retained universally across the state. And I'm wondering if there's federal grant distinctions that are looking for GED programs where this changing the language in one place might end up confusing the people reading the federal grant application and result in Maryland not receiving the money. That's my concern, because there's some reason that this language has been retained universally, and it's either because no one bothered to change it, or there's some stupid administrative thing rolling in the background, and I'm trying to determine which it is.
Well, if we put high school diploma and list both high school diploma and GED, we retain the GED numbers for federal purposes. There's also, by the way, GED/high set. High set is another equivalency degree that some states use. It's capital H, little I, capital S, capital E, capital T. Yep. And when there was back when they redid the GED, there was a big battle, and there were 3 high school diplomas for a while, another one called TASC. That has dropped out, and there are only 2 now. Maryland does not use high set. Some states use both. Mm-hmm. And some just use high set. So in the federal language, I don't have it at hand, I haven't looked at it. There's probably both listed.
And it all depends on how you're writing that language. So if you need funding to support the cost of taking the GED test, that has a cost, and you probably should mention that it's for the cost of preparing for the GED test. However, the end result, nobody receives a GED. That's not a thing in Maryland. They receive a high school diploma as a result of, passing the test. But very, very distinct. If you're going to ask for the funding, it's to cover the cost of paying for the GED. So I guess it depends on what you're asking for, and it would be relevant in that case.
Well, we've really fattened this up very nicely. We've got a lot of good ideas out here, and there'll be some more that pop up as we write this stuff. But this is good. This is good discussion. So should we go on to number 5?
I think we still have to do number 2, and I think we're still going down the list. So
Yeah, and this came out of when I'm watching the CEC reports, which we all have we have copies of all of them in the Dropbox, I think, don't we, Ainsley? For going back as far as they go back. And so I was recommending that the CEC annual reports really do a lot more data, include a lot more data than they currently do. And including capacity now that we've raised that issue. So that's what that's all about. That we have the CEC reports give a lot more data annually than they do. The CEC is the educational council, that the board of education, so to speak, for the Department of Labor, that was put in as part of the law when the labor took over. So I guess there's no comment. I would just like to make sure that we make a recommendation that the CEC report, includes. I'd actually say, instead of just saying educational enrollment, I'd say correctional report, correct more correctional education data in the annual CEC reports.
and go ahead.
Yeah, so I've noted, and I've noted this with DPSCS already, because the reason I recommended that be collapsed into the dashboard is that when DPSCS started produced their dashboard, which gives this data live all the time, their ADP reports and stuff like that, they stopped producing and releasing that ADP report on a sheet like that. And they have the live data available now and the historic data that you go back on the dashboard. So in some ways, that's like the same to me, unless you're asking them to do the dashboard as well as periodically freeze that data and put it into a report format. But I know DPSCS stopped doing that. And to some degree, that seems like administrative waste if you have it frozen on the dashboard on the website to also then go do the paper document. But I guess that's a point that could be discussed.
I know at least like our department, we have legislatively required reports and dashboards, and so sometimes those reports are replaced by dashboards that have more data involved. So I think if we say annual reports or dashboards, that gives the option if there is a time, like I know dashboards are really like labor intensive, having either option going forward.
Okay.
So I just want to say again, it's vague. Publish more correctional education data. Is
Well,
it what it, like what it could be help, it could be disaggregated, it could be focused on enrollment or outcomes or who the students are, like, I just wondering, did the group want to be more specific there?
Well, I'd like to see as much of the dashboard stuff put in an annual report. CEC should put the key elements of the dashboard in its annual report, instead of trying to list them all out. We could shorten that by saying that they use the data that's in the dashboards. I would say, starting with, encourage CEC to publish correctional education data as reported in annual reports or public dashboards.
Say that again.
I would say, like you have the first part, encourage CEC to publish correctional education data as reported in annual or reports or public dashboards. Does that help, Alyssa? Okay.
I don't really know.
Well, what we did is we fattened up the dashboard and the annual reports with a lot of stuff. Now we're saying put into the CEC, as I understand the CEC's annual reports, information from those annual reports or public dashboards.
So
Right.
I think this is regarding internal management
Mhm.
versus public. I feel like public like closure rates, cancellations, I don't know if that might be helpful to publish like publicly. Versus like this is more like, you know, public information, public facing information on correctional education data.
There
That
would
makes sense.
certainly be a debate about how much to put into the CEC report that's all in the dashboard, because if you put it all, there'd be pages and pages and pages. But so there should be data from that annual report or from the public dashboards put into the CEC annual reports, into its annual reports. So maybe encourage CEC to use educational data in annual reports or public dashboards for its annual report. Does that make sense? Encourage CEC to use correctional education data from annual reports or public dashboards in its annual reports.
I think I just might be a little confused because I know that they have one annual report. I think what I'm confused about is like what correctional education data we would like them to put in their annual report that they're not already. I know enrollment was one that like kind of has changed throughout the years, that sometimes there was enrollment listed and sometimes it was by month, sometimes it was by year. So I think what I'm a little confused about is like what data we would like to see in the annual report that we're not currently seeing.
If you wanted to list it all, it would be like taking all the stuff in that, the number one now. It's encouraging CEC to use data that, you know, that's in the annual public dashboards, including blah, 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 for its annual report. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, why wouldn't we want them to publish all the data they've got in?
Judith, I can answer that question. For what it's worth, the CEC annual report is a public-facing document that we discuss a lot of data with this group here that doesn't necessarily get shared with the public due to its, I mean, unfortunately, you know, subjective and political nature. At the end of the day, the CEC annual report requires us to share certain types of information, which we certainly oblige. Any additional information that we would include, you know, we certainly need to clear with both Jason Perkins Cohen and Secretary Carolyn Scruggs before we add any additional information to that report. But that, I think the recommendation would be, like, you could simply recommend to include all data from the dashboard to be included in the CEC annual report. And if we just make that recommendation, I think that's kind of all encompassing. And once that recommendation is made, you know, it'll go through the proper channels and we'll land on what the end result is. But
Right.
Rochelle and I don't make that decision.
Right.
What of this information is subjective? I thought this was just straight numbers.
You know, it's funny. I'll give you one example. It's closure rates. So when we think about a school closing down, a school has, call it 14 classrooms. If the school closes 13 out of 14 classrooms, Judith, would you consider that a closure? I would, and we currently do. However, DPSES does not. And at the end of the day, that can become it has just become political between the two agencies on how we make that determination and then how it's reported to the public. And therefore, that's just one example of a piece of data that can be perceived in one of two ways, and we don't always agree on what that definition is.
Well, and
I'm
that's
sorry, we
fine.
don't currently agree on what that definition is.
Thanks.
That's fine, because the higher powers over and above, or the political filters that go in place are going to change the report somewhat. So I think what you're saying is that just put that in there, but
Yeah,
no,
put the recommendation in there to include everything from the dashboard, and absolutely. For what it's worth, and I'll say just on the one example that I provided, I hope that as a result, this forum allows us to come to a common definition, of that particular data point. And for what it's worth, I think there are probably 2 or 3 other data points that have some level of subjectivity to it.
yeah, I mean, one of the things that's probably going to come up as the virtual classroom gets put in place is will people get full credit for the day for doing virtual stuff versus face-to-face?
It's a good one.
That's a discussion, and
Yep.
and so we can't answer that question here. That's going to have to be answered by a lot of people examining the whole situation and seeing how much work the people actually put out, probably.
Agreed. But to that point, Ainsley, you're right. We do already incorporate a lot of information. I think that this recommendation should simply recommend to include the universal, all of the information that we've collected here in the dashboard.
Okay.
And go ahead.
Yeah, I want to make sure, and I think that maybe our, kind of going through these conversations might be a little bit too much is exactly what is put into the dashboard, but is it possible that we put something in there where the appropriate stakeholder groups are included in the discussion of what's going to be put in the dashboard? And then after the dashboard is created, it's returned to the commission. If possible, we get that analyst to look at it with us, the internal facing dashboard and the public facing dashboard. And then we can make another recommendation going forward in our next report about if we think anything needs to be modified. So we kind of make a beta version, and then we beta test it, and then we make some more modifications. Does that sound like a good kind of compromise?
Well,
I second that for what it's worth. I think that all sounds appropriate.
How about putting a recommendation in there that the commission keep track somehow? The commission will review, the development of the dashboard, and with what going forward with what you're talking about, so that we can continue a discussion about it and review it and make more recommendations. Or put it in there, okay. And number 1. Monitoring the development of the dashboard, and, okay. So it's a live document. The dashboard should be, the data will change, and we need better ways to present it and analyze it. Okay. So where are we? Are we now at what, number 5?
There's my mouse. We are on recommendation 4. So we kind of made a conglomerate on recommendation 1. So recommendation 4, consult an educational data analyst to evaluate the use of correctional education data.
So does that be recommendation 2?
Well, that'll now be recommendation 2, but
yeah, she's going to renumber these things.
Oops.
So we've already talked about the educational data analyst, and didn't seem like anybody had anything to add there.
Rochelle?
Yes, I actually do. I actually feel like the commission could be a little bit more robust in language to ask for staffing for this. We technically have someone that does this part-time, but we don't have the staffing, and I believe it's an integral position. So I'd like to offer that for the consideration of the commission.
And I wholeheartedly support that. The question is, when we submit this thing, there's going to be a price tag put on it, and so we may have conversations with Delegate Pasteur and other delegates about how to get this thing through and how to, word. I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Delegate Pasteur, on asking for a position, because that's going to include money?
Well, yeah. Thank you for asking me. I agree with Rochelle. There's no sense in asking for things and then not having anybody, a person responsible for making sure that all of these things are coming in. This is how things get mixed up, left out, or whatever, shifted. And if we want this to be improved, then we need to have someone dedicated. I don't know that that is at this point really the commission's problem. Her ask is real. And so we ask and we go forward and we see how that works and where we need to go back and work through it. I think that I've heard the commission will a few times here, but the commission doesn't have life forever. And all of you should not be encumbered with trying to make sure all of these pieces are together. So I do agree. That's a long way of saying I agree. The fiscal note is important. We have to look at it. We have to process it and to see how that can be done without taking away from any positions in any department that already exists. But if we don't put it out there, it'll never be discussed or addressed.
Okay.
And if I'm wrong, the other two delegates can say something. I mean, money is always a factor, but if you don't ask, you won't get.
Okay. Yeah, I think we all agree we need that staff person to do that. It's just the politics of it and all that. So, but if you don't ask, you don't get. I mean, if you don't identify something, nobody's ever going to talk about it anymore. Okay. So are we ready for number 3?
Yes. Change the Maryland Code language from 240 calendar days to classroom days for mandatory education. And I'll bring up the language real quick. Let's see. I hope I got the right one. Yeah. Mandatory education program for at least 240 calendar days. So that would just change it to classroom days.
Okay. And some of that will go into discussion into the matrix as we put this together under it. Okay. That's going to be a toughie. I don't know. But I think it's a great one, because I think a lot of people end up getting very few days of school as a result of being enrolled but not going for umpteen reasons.
Why do you think it's going to be tough, Steve? I mean, it seems just so.
It may change who goes into school and the waiting lists and all that. So they'll have to be discussed. So, but as John said some time ago, seat time is important. Sit in your cell is not seat time.
And go ahead.
So this may be a little objected to, but I still prefer the language the department is required to offer, because as a couple of people in the departments have pointed out, sometimes you will get students who have financial issues, mental health issues, other surrounding issues where they are unable or unwilling to do that, and it becomes a continuous problem. and ends up being a disciplinary problem. So when you change the language to the department is required to offer, that does allow them kind of the ability to sidebar those kinds of issues and handle them as necessary.
And for what it's worth, I think that there's a more robust conversation to be had about, and I think I may have touched on this before, but the mandatory hours, I see benefits, I see pros and cons, and I don't know if we've spent a significant portion of time talking about both. But understanding, I understand where Ann is coming from as well, but I can see pros and cons. And I guess I'll ask this group here. Do we see, we obviously know the benefit of more time in the classroom. Does this group have a good understanding of what some of the cons are for lengthening mandatory education time? I will say that when it increased, I believe it increased from 120 to 240, Rochelle, that actually is a factor that we cite in the reduction of the number of GEDs that we get generally. So where does this group stand? Like, do we believe that there are both pros and cons, and is it worth more conversation, or have we just universally already agreed that there are only benefits to lengthening that mandatory time?
Well, the mandatory thing, I go back to the time when there was no mandatory, and the reason we put mandatory in there was because people didn't necessarily want to go to school, and it was our contention as educators that although we want people to come to school willingly, we'd like to get them in there to experience success. And we found out after a few years that all the wardens loved it because disciplinary stuff went down, more people were in school. People went to school and didn't want to leave after they finished their 120 days because all of a sudden they realized they could learn. They felt better about themselves. And so the number is less important than the fact that there is mandatory. So some purists would say you can't force people to go to school. Well, I'm sorry. That's one part of it.
We can and we do, even in the public sector.
Yeah. And so we can do it in corrections because certain liberties aren't there. And I think it was a good thing to do. And you can still have that debate, but.
No, and I agree with you. I think
240
mandatory to a point is very important because there are going to be some folks that see the benefit, but only after they have had to participate in it. The question becomes, at some point, the ones that are not ever bought in or don't ever get bought in, that don't want to voluntarily continue, how long should we keep them in the seat?
Right. Yeah. So I think a lot of this is going to come out of the discussion if we make this recommendation. We're not making it a recommendation yet for legislation. So that we'll have some here that we're going to talk about for legislation. So this will be in the annual report if we leave it as it stated right now, and we'll put some discussion in this that we've had now in the matrix. It stands as a report, but not something that we're requiring labor or Department of Public Safety to do because that would be a matter of law. But it's a place for us to come back and discuss this issue. Well, I guess.
And the only reason I raised it.
Well, and maybe I'm wrong here because isn't this part of ones that we're going to make a recommendation for legislation?
Yeah, I feel like this was a pretty strong recommendation from the group, and just wanted to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to understand that there are two sides to this coin.
And Delegate Simpson is actually the person I'm looking now at the notes because I have more complete notes for this recommendation, and it's Delegate Simpson who's going to put this forward for the legislature to discuss. So I think those discussions are going to come up during legislation.
I wonder if it's worth like tabling the discussion for now, especially until we have DPSCS. I know that this was sent to DPSCS and it was sent to Danielle, but she is out right now. I wonder if maybe like next week we could get together and hash it out a little bit. if people feel comfortable tabling this or if we want to make a recommendation one way or the other.
Okay, so just put on this Delegate Simpson next to it, if you would, Ainsley, at the end of it, and then we'll come back to it. But yeah, there you go, over there where you had it just a minute. Okay, that's good too. All right.
And just for what it's worth, I could actually right now make a justification or make an argument that reducing it back to 120 days could increase the number of GEDs that we complete annually, just so you know. For example, we may have 30 students currently at JCI who don't want to be there, who will not complete when it's over, and they're there for an additional 120 days, whether we call it calendar days or whatever, however we calculate it. We know the way it's calculated could use some reform as well. But that is seat time that's being taken up by some folks that will not complete, no matter what we do. And other folks are on the wait list that could actually fill those seats and complete. So just saying that and I don't have an opinion either way. I could make a justification.
Yeah, I would counter that, having listened to Principal Blackwell, that they have 40 some students when we were visiting, and she was hoping to get 60 some, and she knew the capacity, so we have capacity for 90 something in the classrooms, but yet there weren't. So if there were more students on a wait list, why weren't they in school, I'd say. So we got to look at both sides of this and find out what the heck.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, no opinion either way. And for what it's worth, there are more wait lists than there are folks that are out. So as a rule, the majority of our classrooms operate with a wait list, with people waiting to be seated. Not 100%, but most of them are.
Yeah, well, that's okay. So that's a debate to be.
Can I ask it seems like there might be several different things going on here. One is the 120 versus 240. I mean, John is saying that if you reduce it to 120, you get more GEDs. That might be true, but you might think they're not really qualified. They shouldn't be getting GEDs with only that number.
And Judy, no, that's not the amount of time that they actually spend in the program. That's the amount of minimum time that they need before they can decide to continue or drop out. So right now, we don't allow anybody to drop out at less than 240 days who have been identified. But I believe that there are some folks that know after 120 days, they know that they're going to drop out, and we could fill those seats with other people on a wait list. And again, I see both sides of it. I don't have an opinion either way. I'm just not sure we all understand the pros and cons of this very specific situation to make a recommendation.
I know why it was done. I'll tell you, because I was there during all the legislative process. Secretary Green, who was very pro-education, coming from Montgomery County, because I worked with him there, noted that the school attendance was down and people weren't going. So they upped the number to 240 days to get more people in school and keep them in school. Because we had a big argument about the time of incentives as well. We were trying to introduce legislation to create diminution by, making milestones, getting a diploma, getting a high school diploma, getting, a certificate, of vocational certificate, et cetera. And he just wanted the 240, and we were recommending that. We weren't against it, but it wasn't our bill. It was his bill. And so the diminution thing ended up being, he wasn't going to vote for it. And I cornered him one day. I'll be very frank about this. I spent 5 years saving their program through our association, because all their part-time teachers were being fired in Montgomery County due to all part-time employees in the county being eliminated for budget purposes. He contracted with us to hire them so he could keep them. So I told him, you owe me. I want that diminution thing with certificates, with a determination that you get so many days off your sentence. And he looked at me and said, you're right, I'll give it to you. And so we got both. I never pushed for the 240. They did. So I don't have any investment in this. I want to see if we look at all the data, what's best. Okay.
But isn't the part, I just wanted to finish my thought, isn't part of the question whether someone can be refused continuation after 240 calendar days, even though they haven't been in school that much?
Yes.
So
Those-
that's,
Yeah, and brought up some situations where somebody may be removed from school for a particular reason or put on SEG, and then they're not allowed to come back because they're no longer mandatory because they've served that mandatory piece. So yes, it would make it easier for those folks to come back on. However, there might be a different mechanism for them. You know, I'm not sure if just extending mandatory for all is the best way to solve that problem. Maybe it's if you have been put on SEG or removed from school in less than a certain amount of time, whether it's 90 days or 180 days, you can be put back to the front of the line and automatically reinstituted. I'm not sure what that looks like, but yeah, that was, Ann brought that up, and that's a good point.
Yeah, and if they're, regardless of 240 or 120, if they're on SEG, it should not be counted as being in school. It's because seat time's important. And so, you know, you don't lose your numbers of days by getting into SEG or something, or medical leave, you know, because you're in a hospital or something.
Yeah, and I think it gets complicated with the way that they charge the job when it comes to how they make that decision. So that's a really good point. It's a lot more complex than it seems.
It's a lot of discussion. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's table that one, and then we'll have to talk to Delegate Simpson and anybody else who wants to be involved in that conversation.
well, people have their hands up to Anne and Rochelle.
Yeah, I wanted to propose kind of a compromise solution that takes into account kind of what everybody has said, and that is to require the department to offer 240 classroom days of education, which means that the department cannot kick somebody out or refuse to readmit them before they've reached the 240 days, but require the II to participate mandatory in 120 days of education before they can withdraw. And I think that that kind of splits the difference. It catches my concerns about people being put out because they go on SEG and they're not readmitted. It catches John's concerns about people taking up seats, you know, extensively. And so you're kind of, you're giving some burden to the II, but you're also kind of giving a greater burden to the department to be there to support them further if they choose to go. Does that make sense?
Except that some people who are there for 240 days haven't finished yet. And as you, I think it was you that pointed out that some people got booted out of school once they reached 240 and they hadn't finished. And
so nobody gets booted at the 240. Again,
I've had somebody get booted at the 240.
But Ann brought up some instances that did happen when she was an II. I remember her talking about that. So that
and I see Rochelle's hand is up. I actually have I'd like to understand that. I don't think that that's a thing. Rochelle, are you able to?
So
no reason at least.
Technically we don't. However, I think this is probably one of the most complex conversations that we should take the time to have. And we should do it from a data-driven standpoint. So we should know how much we should be able to, and currently we're not tracking it in that way, but the schools could easily track it, right? What does the seat time look like? And there is motivation. So to Ann's point, there could be a variety of reasons why. So if you've been you're at 240 and you came in at an ASC 3, right? Let's just say, and we felt like, okay, ASC 3, you absolutely should be able in 240 to get to the GED. But if it's a safety reason for an incarcerated individual, sometimes they lag, right? Sometimes they tank the test. Those are not quantitative things that we've been able to say, yes, it's happening, but we know it is happening. I think taking the time to track that, and going back to what Stephen said, we could look at when it was at 120 days, what was the output? When it went to 240, what was the downward trend or upward trend? And then looking at where IIs are at throughout the process and tracking that. would be essential to the conversation. I think the language does need to change though, but we have to understand, to John's point, there are other factors that come into play that will influence the outcomes ultimately as well.
Yeah, I wish Delegate Simpson were on this, but we have to share this with her. And I said, okay, so, and we'll share this all with her, and then maybe call for a separate meeting with her, with anybody else who wants to be involved with it on this particular issue. Okay. All right. I think we could come up with more and more data, or potential bit data here, so maybe we ought to go to the next one now, because we don't want to get too bogged down, because we're going to come back to that one anyway.
So recommendation 4, change the requirement to obtain a GED to include a high school diploma through high school credits or a certificate of completion for special education students.
So I obviously really like this one only because I have a kid right now who has, 19 credits and might end up in an adult facility and going to have to start from the beginning. What I guess I just think we have to be careful of the language. So is special education students with IEPs? Is it students with 504 plans? I mean, definitely it's students with IEPs, but I just think it's special education students is generally understood to be students with IEPs who are eligible for special education services. But I did note, I do think it's interesting, and Rochelle, this is something I noted when I looked at the handbook. One, it looks like labor does identify students who weren't previously identified for special education needs, which is amazing. I just want to give a kudos for that. And I did also there was some mixing of 504 IEP and something else I saw. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I just want to throw out to the group, are we talking IEPs or are we talking 504 plans?
Just a piece of historical data. When the U.S. government, when Congress decided to try to eliminate special ed from adult prisons as a punishment, you commit a crime, you no longer get special ed. And the compromise was to say they can no longer be identified,
right,
after incarceration. That the only ones to be served are those who had an IEP when they got arrested. And so Maryland voted to not do that. They voted to keep what was there originally, that you can identify them once they are incarcerated. Maryland that's still law, and so I'm glad to hear that you saw that. That's in the manual, that people can be identified who hadn't previously been identified. But I also have a question. Are you also serving 504 students? People coming with 504, just IEPs? Rochelle?
Yes, we also serve 504.
Okay, so we should include that in there.
Yes. And I did have a comment on this one. I'm a proponent of this. I wondered if there was an opportunity for us to make it broader, just a consideration. We did have an instance at MTC, I want to say maybe 2 years ago, where we had a student who was close and could finish with high school credits. The barrier for labor was that we don't have teachers we don't do our certifications like according to content area, right? So you're certified, but we don't have certified science, right? We don't do it like the LEA. So we came up with that the student would go into a room. We worked with the school system, I think it's Baltimore City. We had to have this big meeting, and we agreed that the student would have time to sit down and try to gain the credits. But there are two factors. We would need to know who the students were who were close and could get the high school diploma from obtaining school credits. We would need to know that number. We currently don't. And then we would need to come up with how do we serve them.
Right.
But I think there's room for this expansion that could get us more diplomas ultimately if we were to figure that out.
I think that's great. I don't want to interrupt you if you want more, but I wanted to say something. Go ahead. Okay. I just think that's great, and that we ought to find a way to get, like you've been trying to do, but encourage that, to find a way to help the students gain their high school credits. Somehow I'll put that language in here, because there are some, we don't know how many, but even 10 or even 2, if there's, that's great.
And wait, let me figure out my hand here. Okay.
Alyssa, go ahead.
And Ainsley, please put 504 with students with IEPs on that
So-
record, and 504s.
I think what Jessica mentioned is that the certificate of completion is a specific for students with IEPs who, okay, maybe that's
So it is. I mean, I didn't see Jessica's slide, but the problem is there's only a small number of students with disabilities who actually should be on certificate. So you can't. So it's for students who don't have, who aren't able, even with accommodation support services, to meet the requirements for a diploma, and it's pretty rigorous. You have to go through a pretty extensive process, and MSD requires this vetting to make sure the kids are not inappropriately put on certificate track and pulled off the diploma track. So that's, well, okay, so you're going to add it. Okay, so you want to change it to say, you want to add that for certificate of completion.
So just for clarity,
Yeah.
when we originally talked about this, we talked about offering a certificate to help more special education students complete their high school, equivalency. So this would allow a good amount of our O1 students who likely were on certificate track prior to becoming a part of the correctional education system. It would allow them to earn a high school diploma or a high school certificate, but it is a separate thing from a diploma. But we would be able to look at their old IEP and see if they were on certificate track. And that is a discussion that we've had with MSD already to offer that.
I think that's great if we are clarifying that it's for individuals who came into the system
Already on certificate track.
already on certificate track.
Yes.
I think we just need separate sentences. We're trying to ram everything into one sentence here. Change your requirement to obtain a GED to include a high school diploma or a certificate of completion, period, and then bring up this special ed 504 thing. Prior IEP or 504.
And go ahead.
I will admit I don't understand what a 504 plan is at all, so correct me if I'm completely off here. But is there any specific reason that we would want to limit it to people who are identified in the community, understanding that most of our population comes from communities that have poor educational systems and may not have identified a child, but then this is how they got to prison and now they're being identified and we can't serve them? I mean, would it make more sense to determine eligibility based on either a prior or a current evaluation?
I would just take prior out with an IEP or 504, because in as pointed out already, you can identify people once they're incarcerated, and they can have an IEP as determined by special ed procedure. And I don't know whether you could determine somebody needs a 504, but if you prior would help it, I think.
Delegate Pasteur.
Yeah, used to think I understood special education since I've been a special education advocate in my retirement. This language is confusing to me. I don't know if I should just ask it. It's just confusing to me. And it's good to hear from Alyssa's comment that just flashed up is correct. Rochelle's point, it's good that people coming in who had not been identified before are now being identified. This language, to obtain a GED, am I on the right one? Because
Number 4, yeah.
I'm confused. To include a high school diploma through high school credits. Okay, period. Special education students with an IEP can obtain a certificate of completion if eligible.
Those people who will never quite graduate from high school or pass a GED, that would be something. We have students that just work and work and work and never make any progress at a certain point. And
okay, but this reads, special education students with an IEP can, okay, it doesn't say shall, so it does say can obtain, because there are children, the preponderance of them with IEPs, can graduate with a diploma. So in saying can, not everybody processes can, shall, will, all of that. That if they have an IEP coming in or as identified once they're incarcerated, that would have otherwise precluded them from receiving a diploma, can obtain a certificate of completion. So is that what the if eligible means? Anybody they understand what I'm saying?
yes,
Because the way it reads to me now, just on the surface, especially if you don't process the verb can, says that if you have an IEP, you can get a certificate of completion. I'm not even dealing with the if eligible. I'm just dealing with the fact that you can have an IEP and you can still get a diploma. So that could be, that last question to me could be confusing or incorrect, erroneous.
well, this one is and Simpson is going to do this one too. Or no, that's you. That's you.
Okay.
You're going to work on it as a piece of
Why
law.
I'm asking this question now.
Yeah. So we need to work on this with you. So we might just leave it right now, like we did the other one, that to work on that with Delegate Pasteur, work on the language of Delegate Pasteur, and we could have a discussion with all people who want to be involved with that. To have that, because we may not solve it right this moment, but if we sat down and just focused on it, we could probably do better. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's fine. Just as long as we have more conversation with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Ainsley, you can put a note in like you did with Delegate Simpson's up above. So we're gonna, whatever that note was, I can't see it. That we're
I
gonna
can
work.
do that. Yeah. Alyssa?
So Anne, I know you asked me for the 504 document, and I'll find you something. Maryland doesn't have, it's a federal provision, so I can send you some federal information on it. But I love expanding the recommendation to include not just students with disabilities, but students who might be close in terms of credit count. I do worry that's changing a lot. That's doing a pretty significant change. And the question of who then issues the diploma is significant. Is it the homeschool? I mean, the MSDE, labor can't issue the diploma. So it just raises other questions. I do also wonder, and I know mixing thoughts here, I had preliminary talk had a preliminary conversation like a year ago with Baltimore City Public Schools about identifying students. Rochelle talked about that one case a few years ago who were close. Would it be appropriate for this commission to have a conversation, or for Labor to have a conversation with Baltimore City about piloting something where we have students who are close in credit count and Baltimore City is willing to actually still issue the diploma if the student either through there are online programs like Apex where students can run through courses, so you don't have to worry about the certification of the teacher, to get some students past that finish line and actually get the diploma.
Well, I think if we have a meeting on this and fill this thing out, we can probably reword this thing. So let's put a note there, if just for the sake of, we're an hour and 11 and we got an hour and a half and we got a couple more to go. Does that make sense? Because I think Delegate Pastor would love to get more information on this. Alyssa, you have some, and you're going to get some more. You suggested how we get some more. We draw in Baltimore City Public Schools, whatever.
Yeah, it's an important recommendation. It's a huge one. It would have a lot of impact, but it's complicated, I think.
Okay, so let's figure it out.
And that this might even need to be split into two separate recommendations. I think that the high school piece, finishing up your credits, and then the special education piece are different enough to take separately.
It might be, especially when you go to legislation. No, okay. All right. So, very good. Recommendation number 5, and this is Delegate Pasteur again with language. And so this is a biggie. This is a result of the meeting we had with the 3 delegates last week. So we put it into our group. It's my feeling that, first of all, I admire all the people I've met here and in the institutions about the work they're trying to do. I don't think we got any people who are sitting on their butt just twiddling their thumbs. That's not. I do think that we have several agencies involved here that need to be drawn more closely, working together more closely. And the 2 principal ones are DPS, CS, and DOL, but the Maryland Higher Education Commission now is coming in strongly to provide these programs. And MSD always has some stuff that has to do, particularly with a lot of education law and things like that, and reviews of programs and all. And so it's my strong feeling, and I talked to the delegates when we had this discussion, that to create a school board that draws all these together, draws representation from all them and from any other relevant citizens and groups that we deem necessary to coordinate all this, and to appoint one person as a sort of a superintendent, you could call it, as a representative of the board to coordinate all these agencies, so that you talk to each other continually and regularly. And because when a commission disappears, the 4 agencies are going to separate a lot more. I think right now we're drawing a lot of attention to working together, and I really think a mechanism. A lot of states have a school system that draws it all together, or a certified board of ed. This may also solve the high school diploma thing, that they could issue, the school board could issue a high school diploma, but that's another discussion. I feel strongly about that. So about putting together a school board, keeping everything we got, keeping everything where it is, coordinating everything with an oversight board. Call it that if you want. I'll leave it at that. So I don't know, Delegate Pasteur, you wanted to work on some legislation for this, so I turn it over to you.
Sure. I would like to hear, thank you, Stephen. I would like to hear what other people on here are thinking. That is critical. The reason we, meaning the delegates, liked it, and I liked it, and I've not always been a proponent of separating these boards and taking them out of the MSDE and having them have some sort of oversight. But I just see, just as Senator Kelly some time ago did when she then was the main proponent for doing it with the youth centers, that there just are so many pieces here, there, and everywhere that you'd have a body that would bring it together. So I'm just listening to this conversation very carefully about the recommendations. I think about what Ms. Rubin had to say about earlier about the numbers and some of the information we have been discussing. And I think it's so that sometimes one piece has to depend on another piece to do something. I think all of these groups need to be involved. And if right now the education piece, and I'm not real clear on this, is primarily done by labor, then that board would still be connected with labor. If it's under public safety, wherever it's under, that it would still be connected there. But we certainly need a body that is going to pull together this data, that can have it in a place. And I know with some of my former students who've been incarcerated, just trying to get the information that is necessary for them to get what they need while incarcerated has not been easy. And I don't mean from the prison side, I mean from the public system side. And they have far too many other things on the prison side than to be trying to get this information, making a difference and understanding whether a student is eligible for a diploma, certificate, all of those things about which we have spoken today could far more easily be done under the jurisdiction of some sort of board or whatever you'd like to call it. But there's a lot of discussion that goes on here, and this commission will not exist soon. And we pretty much then put out recommendations for the legislators to do whatever they want or do nothing. And you'll be back at square one in your particular departments with folks here, there, and everywhere screaming about what's wrong and what happened. And that's not fair to the people who work every day to try to make excellence happen. So that's an overview of my thinking. I need your thoughts, particularly from labor, particularly from public safety. And I will tell you, I've asked on my side, what is the best way to approach any of you so that I can get that information? And that was a headache. And so I just backed up and said, okay, I guess I'm not supposed to talk to anyone. So, but I don't see the sense in coming up with something, as you said, Stephen, at the beginning, that we're going to move forward. I'm not into moving forward when it has to do with education, unless I know that the players and I are on the same page. I want to be able to speak for the players in this. I want to be able to say, we are not taking money with this from anywhere else. So I don't want anybody to make an amendment, and I'm not talking about this group, on the floor to try to do that. Let's pull this from here and do this from here and do a dance. No, everybody is already doing what they need to do. I want us to be on point, and I'm the one that will make the case, not any of you. I will fight that fight that says this is why it needs to be a solid line item without taking away from anything from labor, public safety. That's my fight. And as long as I have Elizabeth and Karen, and I do having that backup, then that's what we're supposed to do, not cave in. I don't cave in. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just want to jump in, and I want to thank you, Delegate Pastor, for all of your passion around the subject. You are right. At the end of the day, people need to take stances on things that might be controversial or hard to do in order to make progress. So I respect all of that. What I will say is that officially speaking for the Maryland Department of Labor, we don't officially have a stance at the moment. So we're not for it, we're not against it. We officially will allow you all to, consider the options that you have and move forward with the recommendations and, certainly Delegate Pastor legislation if you so choose to do so. Number two, if you have any information or any questions, we're here to provide as much technical assistance as we possibly can to help you make that decision and determine whether or not it's the right one for, both the incarcerated individuals. And really, that's the only one that it matters for. It doesn't matter, staff don't really matter in this particular case. It's all about the customers that we serve. But we're here to serve you and provide you with any information that we can provide to help you get through that process. Please don't ever feel like we are here to provide you information to dissuade you or persuade you to do anything differently. What we can't provide is an opinion, at least without the blessing of the governor. So before the department would take a stance either way, it would need to be blessed by the governor. So just wanted to put that out there, and it's perfectly fine. I don't see this as a, Stephen, I appreciate your entry, your comments prior to digging into this one. I don't see it as a taboo discussion point. So we're here to, consider every option that's on the table. And again, provide you all with whatever technical assistance and information, questions that we can answer to help move this thing forward. I will say personally, as John Feaster, so not speaking on the behalf of the Department of Labor, Delegate Pastor, I appreciate the fact that you say you would hope to be able to move forward with this plan without changing anything at DPSCS or labor, but I am 100% sure that there would be changes, and we would be naive to believe, and really even to say, that this kind of thing could happen without some major changes at both organizations, at both departments. So just want to put that out there as well. If something like this were to move forward, it would not require, as much leadership at the top in the individual agencies. So things would absolutely change. And I just want to point out the fact that when it changed from MSDE to labor, there were some pretty big changes. So I just want to again, be as frank as I can with the group and just understand that there are changes that would absolutely 100% happen as a result if this move were to happen, but it's certainly not a taboo discussion point, and we're here to provide any assistance that we can outside of an opinion on whether or not we should.
Well, thank you. That is really very helpful. But you should know, there's no but, you should know that I like things to move forward and have a signature on them at the end of the session. So along the journey, I'm going to be in touch with the governor's office and having those conversations. So I'm right there with you on that side. And also I know that because I was involved in a different way when the school board, youth centers, all of that transitioned out of MSDE. So I knew who was doing the happy let it go dance and who the people were who were not having the happy receiving dance. It's a lot. You're right. A lot went into it. But what we have found, and that's why we have here all of the involved groups, is that some things just are worked out differently for the people who are there. So let me clarify by saying I'm not trying to see anybody not have a job. What I am trying to see is some clarity in what that means so we can get done better for those who are incarcerated. So I thank you. And that's all I need to know is that, if we have a question, we can ask the question and we will get an answer, because I don't want us sitting in a vacuum, just coming up with a bill that doesn't make sense on any level, because we're not integrally involved in any of these groups. I know MSDE We did the same. We had our first work group on restorative practices schools last week. It was absolutely wonderful. And they had to juggle a few things around. We worked through the fiscal note. So we've worked through those kinds of things. And they ended up doing just a beautiful job of putting together a group of people who will write that comprehensive plan for the state of Maryland, for the school systems. So I get you. I appreciate you. It's going to just really end up taking a look at all of those things and all of those previous recommendations, so we know somebody is paying attention, and you don't have to work through a couple of groups because we have all the people there at the table. Everyone would still have a seat at the table. And I want all of you to know anything that within your department you think I need to know as I'm working on this to send to a drafter who might know nothing, then please, we need to have that shared, but I do understand where you were coming from, Mr. John Feaster the third.
If I could make a couple of comments here, we are not asking the commission to get power to create a school board. We're asking to create a model for more consideration. So we're empowering the board by doing this to really get together and do all the stuff that Delegate Pasteur has talked about and that John, you've raised. And it includes the stakeholders. And the stakeholders, we have 4 listed there, but the stakeholders also will include, in my mind, should include folks we have on a commission who have IIs, who are in the community doing great work and understand the system. It should include maybe advisory groups such as Major, which has a very positive record for prison improvement. It should improve, maybe include some. We have to come up with a list of who should be, maybe public school like Baltimore City, because so many of their students end up being incarcerated, so maybe they should be. But whatever that board is, get people at the table on that board so that this stuff gets coordinated and new regulations, rules, new permutations are made. I have made very clear right from the beginning, I'm not looking to, like as Delegate said, nobody should lose their job. We have precious few people doing this work, and we need more anyway. And we have a lot of excellent people doing this work, and want to want them to know that, we're not, their jobs are not anything we're looking at. We're looking to enhance their power, their capability, and what they do in the classroom. I've also had a lot of experience going around the country, been to all 48 states over the years as the head of the Correctional Education Association. I worked in Texas and Ohio, and they have a much more powerful board than we have here in Maryland. And they have a much more consistent system because of that. And it can be put together in all kinds of ways to fit each state, but there's something more powerful needs to be done in Maryland, because correctional ed is not at the hierarchy of the Department of Labor, and it's not at the hierarchy at public safety. It's down at a lower level, and it needs to be elevated. And I said that to you, John, before. I also do not want it stuck in the public safety department, because then it becomes something else. It needs to be, public safety has its say, labor, all the teachers need to have its say, higher education has to be coordinated with this, MSD, get them together, work it out. That's all. And that's where I'm coming from. I love correctional education. It was my whole life in Maryland. I want to see it to be the best. And I think we can make it better than it is now, and help it be better because of the restrictions and things we find that we need something better, higher to solve it and make it work better. That's all.
And go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to say that I think that a board is a collaborative leadership structure. And I think that what is being envisioned when you say people are going to go is a top-down leadership structure in which that collaboration is replaced with it being shoved under a specific department. And I don't think that that's what any of us are talking about. I think the purpose is to maintain leadership stability. I will be the first one to scream if leadership stability is disrupted at this point, because I think the worst thing that you can do when making a major change is to disrupt the current leadership that has all of that institutional memory and stick a new person in there. So, and I see Delegate Pastor saying thumbs up. So I think that all of us would go far from a recommendation that did what you're concerned about. And all of us are prepared to defend the existing leaders and put you into a structure that empowers you to do your job more effectively and utilize more resources. And I hope that helps.
Okay, that's silence. I'm
I
saying
appreciate it.
right on. That's where I am. That's where I am. I get sick and tired of the changes, especially when people are doing the work, but needs more support, some kind of structure, a different kind of structure to help it. So yes, thank you, Ann. What did I say? You speak truth when we're babbling, and sometimes I'm the babbler. Thank you.
And I apologize, Ainsley, Steve, and I actually have a hard stop at 11:30. I've got an HR issue to take care of. So Rochelle and Jessica are still here to be able to take notes if we need anything else. I appreciate all the conversation. I appreciate the care and concern for all the departments included. I appreciate it. So
John, and before, so I don't want you to leave without making one comment back to you. Go ahead.
I was just going to thank Delegate Pasteur once again, and please just reinforce, please don't ever feel like you can't partner with us for whatever information you need.
Old school, John. You know, I love that you're the third.
We're going to vote on this next Wednesday. So I want this to come out of, we have to say this is coming out of our work group going to the commission for next Wednesday to discuss and approve, so that, we go forward. Delegate Pasteur can go forward any way she wants or not with her separate legislation, but we're going to work as closely as she wants us with her. And I know her, she's going to ask for everything, and I'll give her everything I can.
Sure. Yeah. And labor, we have been abstaining from either, for or against all the recommendations. So we're just here to provide information. So we're certainly not gonna, come out against.
Okay.
As far as I can see, the recommendations that you have so far.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we have hit the 11:30 point. We have recommendation 7 yet. Do you want to? If everybody can stay on for that really quick, just for a few minutes. And Ainsley, you want to talk about that a little bit?
I'll let Ann describe it. I know we're kind of dropping like flies over here, but this is really important. And Ann this is just a snippet of what she's typed up. She's got like a whole 2 pages, so she's very informed on this, and I'm excited to hear from her.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I have to drop just reading it. I can tell you I don't have any concerns or or anything to add to it or comments, but Rochelle and Jessica, please chime in. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you, John.
And so a fiscal mapping project is really a project where you take stock of what funds are coming in and determine if they're being effectively utilized, how they could be more effectively utilized. And most importantly to me is identifying other funding opportunities that might be available to you. So this is something, and I sent some links to Ainsley where this has been done in other states, where this has been Jobs for the Future. Actually, the grant that we just applied for is one of the trainers on this. And it has been effective in allowing people to, allowing departments to sustain unstable funding environments. It lets you know what's threatened. It lets you know what's solid. It makes sure that you don't have any of your critical infrastructure on something that's threatened while you have some discretionary project on something that's solid. If we don't know what we have, we can't move things around to construct our department or our interdepartmental work safely. After a fiscal mapping project, you have this interdepartmental group that has been formed to do this project. And then the next step is really to move forward with an interdepartmental strategic plan, which is determining what the priorities are across, between labor, between correctional edit, DPSCS, between, youth detention, DJS, where they have some of these K-12 schools. What are those important things that require buy-in from all the different departments, and how can we coordinate? Working out those administrative hangups that we always get into the debates about on commission meetings, but really this would be creating a proper forum where those things could be ironed out. So I think this is really important. It's something, to my understanding, that is being done in other areas of the state, and particularly with what looks like maybe some disruptions that will probably hit the ground over the next year or two. I think it's important that we have this done for emergency preparedness.
Okay. Any comments? Any suggestions? I mean, I'm fine with that. I think that's something that if we end up creating a school board, they ought to be doing some of this, but because it's going to be a little harder to get everybody to do it now together without a unifying force above it. You have to get people to volunteer to come together from all these different agencies to do this mapping. But okay.
Delegate Pastor.
Yes, I would like to work with Ann on this, because I think Stephen is correct. This is really going to touch on how we think about even having a board and every single recommendation that's here. I'm pretty sure that the governor and the legislators would be very interested and very happy to see things laid out, if I'm understanding what Ann is saying, if I'm understanding it correctly, to see, because one thing is for sure, education and the needs of education on any level is fluid. No matter how much we think it is fluid. And that means there are going to be new things and new ideas and changes, etc., that need to be made. And am I touching on what you're sharing?
Exactly. That is the point, figuring out where we are today, kind of doing a resource map, and then you do the needs assessment, and then you build a strategic plan. And so that's exactly it. I can share, if that's okay, Ainsley, I can share the document that I shared with you. I mean, then I would be happy to discuss it further. I did originally, in my recommendation, have something that reached into creating that structure that you're talking about with the school board. I redacted it because you had already done it. And I feel like whatever you did with your experience is going to be 1,000 times better than I could have done. So I redacted that portion back to just the fiscal mapping project and interdepartmental strategic plan, knowing that you were putting forth recommendation 6, and they're kind of meant to work together. But I think either project is too big to be a single recommendation.
Great. Thank you. So may I work with you on that? Is that okay?
Absolutely. That's perfect. I would be happy to work with you on it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to have the meeting next week, and in the meantime, some of us can be communicating. I know I'm going to hopefully talk to the delegate a little bit more about number 6, because I sent some stuff over to you, and I'd really like to get your reaction. And from what John has said, it doesn't look like we're going to get any opposition from labor, because they're, but maybe something, over time, they're going to definitely be involved with how we develop something here. So that's great. As soon as we have this meeting next week and get total approval of the commission, then we're going to have to start filling out in the matrix all this stuff for the final report. So I'm very proud of all the work that everybody's done. The committees have come up with terrific stuff. I don't know what a commission would have done without the 3 work groups, because everybody's such at a high level that you can't get people to give their time. So the work group people, many of whom are on the commission, have done a wonderful job with this, and just bodes well for the future of correctional education. So With that, unless there's anything else, I would hope that Nancy could just stay on for a minute after the rest of us. But does anybody else want to make any comments or suggestions before we resign or end the meeting 9 minutes over? Okay. Well, thank you all. Do I hear a motion to end the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Second? Okay.
Second.
Okay, 2 seconds. So a hand and a word. Okay. Thank you all so much. To be continued. See you next Thursday. Bye now.